One person in the room. One person again. It's probably why I shouldn't do an impromptu stream with a flickering camera. Hi, A. Two people? Okay. Literally got two people in after a couple of minutes, so that's good. Camera's sorting itself out. The web camera's sorting itself out slowly. I never understand why it doesn't settle down straight away. Bad Linux driver, probably. Don't know. So all two of you who are in the room right now, if you're not subscribers to my channel, or you don't know what channel this is, being it's a Linux channel, I'll probably just randomly talk about Linux or whatever. If anybody's got any questions. But I haven't, this is literally an impromptu stream, so I haven't prepared anything. Because I saw Chris Occhipinti did it recently, so I thought, why not? I'll do the same. And I haven't made too many videos lately, so I have got a video I'm going to make today, but I thought, why not throw in a live stream? And now the camera's finally calming down. Why does it do that? Why does it take time to settle down? I don't know. So there we go. There you go. Will the ThinkPad bring in people? I don't know. I thought Linux was all the rage now that PewDiePie, whatever his name is, PewDiePie, now uses Arch Linux. Maybe we could talk about that. I don't know. Yeah, can you actually hear me? This is what I'm wondering. All two of you. Great. 3 people now. Big time. Now it's funny, when I prepared my live stream back in December, I think I hit 30 people. That was interesting, considering this is still a relatively new channel, and then I don't even think I had 1,000 subscribers. Yeah, camera's better now, thanks. But then again, I think Chris Occhipinti, when he did his live stream, he only had like impromptu live stream. You only had like 6 people in it at a time. I don't know. So 2 of you in the room, if you've got any questions, if you actually do subscribe to this channel, you do know what this channel is about. Okay, all 1 of you now. It'd be funny if that 1 person was me. I'm just talking to myself. Opinion on Android. Hey, Prosperous Potato. Opinion on Android. Now, it's funny you mention that because I will be doing a video on Linux. Well, we'll be doing a video on phones. So it's funny you mention that. It's like you can read my mind. But I don't want to give too much away on that video, which I'll be recording today and uploading tonight, I guess, for my patrons. What I will say is my opinion on Android is generally good in itself, much better than iOS because, of course, it's open source. My issue with Android is Google and manufacturers for obvious reasons, because really any phone you buy is hugely locked down by default. And a huge amount of the software that's pre-installed is uninstallable. And so many phones have so many different versions of Android that rely on Google to support them. So unlike this ThinkPad here, which using the core Linux kernel, x86 and all this kind of thing, has no real limitations. The only limitation is that this hardware will not be sufficient for its user. Okay, so the hardware will eventually be too old to support whatever I'm trying to do on it, whether it's a highly graphical application or, say, if I was playing computer games, obviously I'd need to have newer hardware. The problem with Android under Google is that you will no longer, as you would probably know, get updates on Android after so many years, because Google no longer supports that hardware with that Android version, or the manufacturer will not support, because they're usually downstream of the upstream Google Android support, and they'll then apply their own patches to their phone. And this even applies to, so I use, where is it? I'm giving too much away on this video, but whatever, doesn't matter. I use this phone. This is a Google Pixel 5. It's got Graphene OS on it, which you might have heard of, which is relatively you're kind of not, there's less limitations. There's fewer limitations than using stock Android, of course. Well, not stock Android, but using the default supplied Android ROM and bootloader and all this, and it replaces that. But of course, you can only get Graphene based on Pixel phones. So again, it's just a huge hardware limitation, a huge vendor limitation, and then Google's limitations. So it's just a big pain. But generally, in itself, I'm not a negative on it, and I'll cover this in the video I do. Just to briefly say more on that, I don't want a Linux phone, if that makes any sense. I want an Android phone. Now, I know Android uses the Linux kernel in some way or another, but I do want an Android phone. I do want to use a graphical user interface. I don't want to use Unix on my phone, but I'll cover that in a video. So I hope that makes sense. So Android in itself, positive. All the stuff surrounding it, vendors, manufacturers, Google, not so good. But I still see it as a better than iOS, for example, or an iPhone, for obvious reasons, because of the huge limitations with Apple, which you can't really get around. I guess if you're in Europe, you've got more opportunities to sideload things, and there's probably other hacks out there. So there you go. I hope that kind of answers your question. And you should see a video tomorrow, funny enough, more specifically about what I feel about phones and Android. But that's my general opinion. Good question. 4 people now. Wow, if I get up to 6, I'll be hitting Chris Occhipinti numbers. It's funny, in that live stream, he said how crazy it was that he gets so few views, considering how many years he's been going and how much he's taught people. But I guess people don't want to see videos on Bash or Shell. But there we go. I have a Windows phone. I installed Debian on, and there's a release of Lineage OS I was going to install. Well, now, interestingly, of course, if you've got a Windows phone, I don't think you can get updates for Windows phones, right? You install Debian on it, and there's a release. So Lineage OS is really, I guess, a less security-orientated Graphene OS, and you've got Calyx OS or something. So, I mean, Lineage OS seems to me a good option if you can get it installed on your phone. Now, it's funny because one of the things I was going to cover in the video was that Google now say you can install or allow you to install Debian on your phone if you've got Android, I don't know, 15 or 16 or something. But my issue with that is I don't really want to be using a Linux desktop or Linux base install on a phone. To me, that's not good user interface. And that's not a criticism of Debian. That's not criticism of Unix-like environments. As you know, if you see my videos, I'm very much in favor of Unix. I'm just not in favor of it on my phone. And that's where, by nature of a phone, graphically, you want to be able to press buttons because you don't have a keyboard, and I'm not going to be carrying a keyboard around for my phone. So, but I'm not necessarily in favor of phones, only that it's just a necessary evil in society, I guess. And I use evil just because, you know, let's be honest about it. A phone and a computer is a tool. And what people choose to use it for is generally many things. And a lot of it isn't always as a tool. It's usually involving, you know, sponge of time, which is gamification of social media, games themselves, which is fine, I guess, if that's what people want to do. But for me, a phone is just a tool for work, for family, for friends, to communicate. And I don't want to have to use a Unix desktop environment to click a button for that. That, for me, is where a phone works well with a graphical user interface. I mean, I've got Termux installed on my phone. Well, I've got another backup phone, which I've got Termux, and I've played around in Termux to, you know, just test things out in shell scripting, Bash, or whatever. But if I needed to, and I didn't have my computer with me, but it's really, I'm not interested in like interacting with the APIs or anything. It's funny because Chris Occhipinti is very much into that, but he's got like his phone connected up to like different APIs for phone, for lighting at home. He can automatically do things, and he has like, I don't know, a pump for his well or something that he monitors if there's, because it can be expensive if it breaks and it's over pressurized. I don't know. Okay, talk too much about phones because I'm now down to 2 people. But yeah, Lineage OS, I think that's a good idea. To me, that's better than using Debian, but I don't know your use case. I mean, I'm assuming you're using your phone to call, communicate with friends and family, and really Linux on the phone isn't too good even now. I know it's getting better. I think Brodie Robertson did a video on a Linux phone. But... Three people now. I just realised I've got share screen. What that does. Chrome window. Mm. It doesn't work. Oh, there you go. Down to one person now. That's not going well. Did it ask one question though? So that's something. Whoa. Look at that. Matrix. Sharing the screen. So I didn't realize you could share the screen through Google Chrome. I've got to share Chrome tab. Two people now. Any other questions? Anybody got any thoughts on the whole PewDiePie Linux video using Hyperland or whatever it's called? And then even, was it the Primogen, whatever his name is, he's now sort of using that Hyperland. I wonder how many people watch that video now. Somebody thumbs up. Thank you very much. 4 people. It's going crazy in here. So how many people watched the PewDiePie Linux video? 5.2 million. Now I'm going to share my screen. Share. Let's just share this window because that's one. There you go. Can you see that? 5.2 million. That's how big the Linux desktop is. Should he install Gentoo? Gentoo, well, oh, thanks, Dada Tay. I'm pleased that worked. I think he should. I think he probably will end up being a Gentoo user because he'll want ultimate customization. That's usually how these things go. And you could tell how much he was into customizing Hyperland. I haven't. Hi, Folk Survival. Good to see you. I haven't installed Hyperland. I haven't tried Hyperland. It doesn't really interest me. So if you've been watching the Primogen recently, he installed he installed Arch Linux. He replaced well, Debian basically, but Pop OS or whatever it was, and his setup, and replaced i3 with Hyperland, and he replaced what else? Did he replace Tmux with WesTerm, and therefore replaced Xterm with WesTerm, because it's both a multiplexer and or a tiling window type thing with being a terminal as well. Now it's interesting. I mean, he did it as a video, really. He did it as a demonstration, and he was sort of riffing off PewDiePie. Personally, I'm not interested in trying it. Maybe I should as a video, just as an exercise, but it just doesn't really matter to me. I mean, a bit like the Primogen, you know, the i3 is just i3. It just does what I need it to. And as you know, if you watch my videos, you know I'm not necessarily big on X11 or Wayland. I'm happy to do most of what I do for the desktop in the TTY. So it's just not really worth the effort. And obviously, the videos I've done on Wayland, and obviously Hyperland is Wayland, isn't it? I did Sway configuration. So I did a whole configuration series of sorts on Wayland using Sway. Configuration series on Sway uses Wayland, if that makes sense. That being said, I'm not absolutely against doing it, and I'm not against Hyperland. And I thought, is it Vaxry or whatever his name is, the developer of Hyperland, kind of saw through the whole PR nonsense that is Cosmic Desktop. Which I'm not against any desktop. People can use what they want, but the thing with the whole Cosmic Desktop was it was a relatively big Linux news story that's still continuing on the face of it, and I say this in this sense, on the face of it, and not, as far as I'm concerned, terribly exciting desktop environment, that the novelty is that it's made in Rust, and it includes some tiling. But to me, that's not exciting or interesting. I guess some people, some Linux video creators, see it as a big win for the desktop, getting a new desktop environment on top of KDE and GNOME. But I don't care about KDE or GNOME either. Not anti them. I've used them, but I just don't need them. And let's be honest about it, there's enough content creators, there's enough videos on KDE and GNOME out there. And even Hyperland, I don't think it needs my contribution. I mean, that's also another reason why I did the TTY videos, and will still continue to do the TTY videos, because they're kind of more the exception to the rule, and it's what I use. You know, I'm being honest. That's how I use the Linux desktop, which I don't tend to see too many other people doing. I'll be honest, I don't see anybody doing it. And if you remember, if you go back to my aims for Linux video, or whatever I called it, and what I'm trying to achieve with Linux, the whole point was that I wanted to demonstrate that I can do 90% of what I need to do in the TTY. Now, you can take that with a pinch of salt, because people will spend a long time on their web browser, which of course you need a graphical environment, unless you're using Lynx or W3M or something similar, which is not really realistic in the modern age. Depends what you're doing. So that's a huge caveat, but I tend to try and do most of what I do in the TTY, and I'm trying to demonstrate that it's perfectly possible, and also demonstrate that, you know, I'm future-proofing these laptops for good reason, because I don't like modern laptops. I don't like what they've done. They've soldered everything together, all the components. I don't like the modern keyboards and other things. I've done videos on that. Now I'm down to 2 viewers. The moment I said I don't like modern laptops, bam, 2 people gone. I think I use X11 window forwarding over SSH too much to switch to Wayland. Well, exactly. It's like anything. Your use case is more important than trends. And it's the same with to me, making the videos is more about being earnest than trends. Now, it's not to say I won't cover things in the news. It's not to say I haven't done videos on things I don't literally, or I have done videos on things I do not literally use if they're interesting, but I try to be earnest. So there's just no reason to stop your workflow. Now it's interesting, X11 window forwarding, I don't think there is an actual equivalent over Wayland, is there? Is that right? Did you see that Zany has returned and is making new ThinkPad and OpenBSD videos? Yeah. Sorry, I didn't reply to your comment, folks. Survival. I only saw it about just before I started this stream. No, I haven't. But let's have a look. Zany. I don't know if I've ever watched any Zany videos. Zany, OpenBSD. OpenBSD or FreeBSD? Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen. Window. So I'm guessing this Zany, yeah? You know, I think you'd mentioned him before, and I hadn't really looked at his videos, if I remember rightly, or I had a look. So, oh yeah, so he's got some new videos. Interesting. I'm sharing my OpenBSD screen. So he's using OpenBSD now, is that right? And what was he using before? Nix OS. Oh. Okay. I'll have to have a look at that. Yeah, so I'll have to have a look at Zany. Be interesting. Because I did make a video about the Linux side of things, or that for me, Unix is more important than Linux. And obviously OpenBSD is very Unix environment based. And if I didn't have the Linux kernel for whatever reason, if it stopped tomorrow, I would probably install OpenBSD. So yeah, that could be interesting. I will have a look. I will have a look at those videos. Thanks for the heads up. And remind me, folks, Survival, do you use OpenBSD? I can't remember what you use. I'm sure you've mentioned. I presume you use a ThinkPad. Anyway, I can't remember. Let's grab some water. You do use OpenBSD. Cool. The only thing with OpenBSD, I have installed. Oh, you use Void. That's it. Sorry, you did say. The only thing with OpenBSD, and I think you can get around this once you've installed it, is, I'm trying to remember, was there something about, again, there's certain core utilities I don't really use, and that probably isn't necessarily a bad thing, but there aren't necessarily equivalents for, like LSBLK. I think if you want to use like LSBLK in OpenBSD, you have to use another different core utility that they provide, but you'd have to do all kinds of regexing or something to get it displayed like LSBLK. Maybe that doesn't literally matter, but just, I don't know. LSBLK is so useful to seeing drives and information, and a lot of my scripts on my TTYSH program script or whatever uses things like LSBLK. So really, what I'm using isn't, well, POSIX. I mean, it's written in shell. It's POSIX in that way, but I'd have to change that. It's not a big deal, really, and it would be an interesting experiment to learn OpenBSD. So who knows, one day. Also, the only other thing is, although this testing machine here is running Arch Linux, on my other machine, I'm actually using Artix because I can use Runit, and Runit is just so fast. But yeah, I'm not against using OpenBSD in many ways. It's probably better for some things. Wow, 6 users now. I've gone full Chris Occhipinti. Wow, great. Welcome. I mostly use Void. Ghosts Haunted. Hello. I'm on Garuda Cinnamon. Okay, yeah, Cinnamon's great. Cinnamon is a just nice desktop environment, although again I don't use it. It is a nice desktop environment. Gentoo and Artix plus DWM. Nice prosperous potato. Good combination. Yeah, I like DWM. In the days when I was using like Luke Smith's setup, I like DWM. I was basically having his sort of setup, but my only, it's not even a reservation. I just like having i3 being in the package repositories, the main package repositories being updated. With DWM, of course, there's nothing wrong with it, but just in principle, I don't feel I should have to sounds ridiculous. I don't feel it should be separate from the repositories, not because of any real security issues, but if it gets an update, I've got to check the update, compile it. Will it break anything? And I know they don't get updates very often. I know it's very simple, but I just, in principle, I like having things such as i3, and that's including as well my terminal, which I just use Xterm, in my repositories. And again, like I've said, for me, the focus isn't trying to use X11, it's trying to use a TTY. So DWM, ST, all these things don't matter enough to me, although I think they're great. And anyway, so Folk Survival, I've tried OpenBSD, FreeBSD, NetBSD, but always run into hardware issues. Yeah, see, this is the thing with running these X201 ThinkPads. I'm not expecting hardware issues with OpenBSD, but of course, this is really where the Linux kernel, I guess, is beneficial. It is tested so much on so many people will run it on just about anything, and therefore any issues will get resolved. Or, you know, of course, Linus Torvalds with the Linux kernel is really, the Linux kernel is just device drivers now, is it, would you say, and hardware drivers and hardware. It's his focus is for it to run on anything and everything. So I guess that's the only issue with BSD, is it just doesn't have as many people using it, eyes on it, and newer hardware, probably graphics cards, probably a big issue. But I've even heard, older hardware, for whatever reason, is not always great on OpenBSD. It's a shame. I tried Alpine recently, and it's pretty good. I'll probably go back to plain Arch at some point. Yeah, Alpine's one of those ones I want to try, because, of course, it is very lightweight, and they do certain things a certain way. But it's one of those ones I will have to spend time with. I'm trying not to just do like a distro review type thing and not really understand what's going on with something like Alpine, which you probably wouldn't be able to do anyway. You probably have to spend some real time looking at it. But yeah, I should do a video on Alpine at some point. But good to hear that it's pretty good. Prosperous Potato. I thought about switching to run it on my Gen 2 ThinkPad. Yeah. The thing is, again, systemd, to be fair, just kind of works. But of course, with systemd is not just an init system, is it? It's a whole suite of packages, including an init system package, let's say. And it's fine. It just works. It seems to just work. But run it is just fast, and I just want to try and future-proof this to have speed. So for me, run it on my main computer. This uses systemd. This is just plain Arch. As you know, DWM is in the Gen 2 repo, so I'm good. Well, this is the thing, of course, Gen 2 is, about compiling, right? If you're using Gen 2, I know you might have binaries, because Gen 2 does provide binaries. But for me, and here's the thing, if I'm on Gen 2, it's not a hill I would want to die on, but I would feel that I would want to compile everything. But again, until I use something, it probably wouldn't be a hill I would die on. I'd probably, if I was using Gen 2, I would have some things binaries, and I'd compile other things. Things like DWM, I'd just compile, I guess, because of course I doubt they even provide it as a binary, would they? I mean, this is the thing, because people might say with DWM, we'll just use the AUR, but again, it just doesn't feel right to me. Something like that, I just feel should be in the repositories. Of course, it's on Arch, it's not going to be, because it's not going to be a binary. You're going to compile it, but whatever. For me, I just know i3, Xterm, if I'm using X11, is perfectly fine. If I'm using Wayland, I'm joking. If I'm using Wayland, then Sway with Foot terminal, I guess it is what I would use. Someone with zero Linux experience. I tried NixOS out of frustration with Windows, and it works. I had none of the problems casual people have when moving to Linux. And AI bots helped a lot. Jay Hereg. Well, Hereg, sorry. Jay Hereg. That's good to hear. So you had zero Linux experience, and you got NixOS working. Impressive, because if I'm right in thinking, NixOS is its own language, which is one thing I'm just not interested in. I don't really want to learn a new language to do the configuration file personally, but it's interesting you used AI bots that helped you. Well done. Very impressive. Have you thought about doing videos on NixOS yourself, Jay Hereg? Sounds like you've knocked it out of the park there. Well done. Yeah, I mean, Windows is just a disgrace in many ways. Just, what can you say? What can you say about Windows that hasn't already been said a million times? It just gets worse and worse. It's so frustrating. But it depends. I mean, depends what you're doing. If you're using it for business or work, it's what you have to use. There are a lot of videos in regards to devs moving to NixOS, but for casual people, they just say, don't even think about NixOS. However, configuration sounds plain English, the Nix language thing, I mean. Oh, okay, interesting. Well done. Impressive. The thing with people saying don't try it, I guess they're just looking out for people getting frustrated early on, but it's like anything. If you read the manuals, you pay attention to what you're doing, you're probably going to be all right. It depends how much tolerance you have to difficulty, instructions, or information. But it sounds like you had a pretty smart take on using AI bots and others to give you information, help you over the line. I mean, even look at what was it recently? The Primogen, I mentioned him earlier. He switched to Hyperland, and he doesn't do desktop environments. He doesn't do Linux in the sense of he's not interested in configuration. He just wants a developer environment that's easy for him. He doesn't go into configuration things. So, that makes sense to use AI helpers, which he used, I think in the video, used like AI helpers to do Hyperland configuration. So there you go. Well done. Just do what works for you. I think that's always the best way. That was a bit of a ramble there. I didn't say any of that coherently, but of course, if you think of Brodie Robertson, his first Linux install and his only Linux install was Arch Linux. So, I think if you're a developer, you probably are going to have more tolerance for getting it right. If you're a casual user, in the sense of, you don't do development, you don't do programming, you don't even do customization, I guess it can be pretty off-putting for a lot of people. So I don't know if you've got like a developer background or you tinker with computers or configuration in Windows beforehand. I don't know. Wow, up to 10 people. Hello, people. Claude is very good at setting up basic stuff, but I do not have a background in software. So Nick's promise of setting it up once and not worrying about it again is a very good idea. Okay, interesting. So Claude, which I've heard very good things about for programming and development, really helped you there. Well done. That's really good, actually. That's really good for people who want to get into Linux, but want to have, let's say, a base install that they can use something like Claude to set them up, but will just work. But they still don't want to have billions of packages that KDE provide or some desktop environment. So in the long term, you can still customize it to how you want. And of course, you can just change that config file and reboot your system, right? And it'll just pull all the packages it needs. And yeah. I don't want to offend anyone, but Linux community obsession with writing and stuff is just crazy to me. I do not want to nitpick everything about my system. I want it to work, but I hate Windows. Well, in a way, I agree with you. Yeah, how to explain how I feel about it. So I pretty much agree with you. Well, let's take PewDiePie, for example. So PewDiePie riced his system to the max, didn't he? The caveat to that was that's what got him onto Linux and gave him bespoke control. First of all, it got him off Adobe, which is good. So he's not paying a horrible Adobe subscription. If you've ever been trapped on one of those, it's abysmal. And, you know, their software is good, but also overrated. And the subscription is a disgrace. Their subscription model is horrific. And the exit clause is an insult and should be illegal. I think most people would agree on that. So that's it, just that itself. And of course, Microsoft, which is kind of the same thing. You know, your exit fee to Microsoft is, or not an exit fee, but your upgrade fee is basically a new computer, because Windows 10 will no longer receive updates, and Windows 11 will not work on your computer if it dares to be more than, you know, so many years old. Now, that being said, the great thing about ricing is most people probably won't rice their Linux desktop, but you've always got the option. I guess that's the thing with Windows. You don't really have the option, not in any true sense of the word. You know, you're infinitely limited where you're just unlimited with Linux. So you will always have the ricing side of it. Now on obviously the ricers are probably very vocal, and of course you've got you've got Reddit, you know, which is obviously going to be very vocal, it's very visual ricing. So I'm not so negative about it. I don't personally care about it. I'm very much the same as you. As you can see, I just have i3 full screen, don't use gaps even. I'm not into, you know, if you see my Wayland and X11 configuration, of course, I like to keep it very simple. I just want the information I need, but I want to have certain options, you know. So yes, I agree with you. I just want things to work, but I understand why the ricing thing exists, and it's kind of disproportionate, I think, to how many people are. It's just those people are very loud about it, and obviously now with the PewDiePie video, obviously that's very much in the Linux news. So I don't know, but I do agree with you. Most MVP, hello MVP. I've noticed you commented on videos of mine before. Most people I know got into Linux customizing through rice and eventually matured into DWM efficiently type people. Yeah, that's the thing. You know, it's always going to be that element of getting into ricing because they want their desktops. Let's put it this way. So if you ever use Windows and you've tried to customize things, just visually, you've got huge limitations, right? Now, what I found as a just works thing, I wanted to be able to have basically a tiling desktop, or just be able to, for screenwriting, I wanted to have two panes, one at the top, one at the bottom, that were horizontally drawn across the screen. So two windows horizontally split. Now, if you've used, now it might be different now in Windows 11, but if you've used Windows, what tended to happen was you could have, their functionality allowed you to have a top and a bottom window, but it would draw it halfway across the screen. So you had to manually drag it across. That even with shortcuts, there are no shortcuts to have two panes, just, which is just crazy. How can you have half the functionality? Why didn't they just put in the full functionality? It's just bizarre. You know, you've sort of gone half the way and you're like, well, that'll do. People can just manually drag the window across to get two horizontal windows. I mean, it's just strange behavior, even for Windows standards. It's like a tease, you know. Here's what you could have had. So That's why, honestly, that's probably why I went to Linux, because I just couldn't tolerate this not working anymore. So again, you know, whether it's writing or working, you're just limited with Windows. I think that's an obvious thing, and the same with Mac. I mean, I had an issue with somebody's Mac computer, and it was just, I'm not even going to get into it. It's just so bad, just horrific. You know, well, how amusing recently had, if anybody knows Kai Hendry, great Linux YouTuber of the past, of course, he now uses Mac and SSHs through Visual Studio Code into his Arch Linux machine. I mean, what is going on in the world? Absolutely. I mean, he was the original DWM, not even Ricer. I mean, just works. But hey, I mean, Brady Robertson's big into Cosmic Desktop now, which is not as bad. But I mean, for me personally, it's just crazy. But whatever. Right. So, Prosperous Potato, have you Libre booted your ThinkPad? Now, unfortunately, so this ThinkPad is an X201. And unfortunately, X201 cannot be Libre booted, only core booted. Another issue with core booting an X201 is there's some stability issues on like the fan and powering off. So I was close to core booting my other X201, but I didn't. I don't want those issues. Now, you know, you can set up like ThinkFan or well, I actually, on my TTYSH, I just actually interact with, I'll show you actually. I will actually show you. So let's share the screen. A second. So I actually let's go down to here. So what I actually do with my fan speed, if I want to, is you can actually go into the processes and you can change the fan speed. So you can echo auto if you want automatic fan speed for your ThinkPad. You can have level 2, 4, 7. I've got this more complex now. This is an old version of it, but you can change the fan speed. So in theory, I could change the fans. I could change the fan speed, and it wouldn't be a problem. So because what's happening with the core boot of X201s was the fan speed would just stop when it booted up. Whatever reason, it wasn't working properly, and you'd have to manually do it. Now, interesting with Libre boot, they stopped supporting core boot X201s because they also develop upstream to core boot Libre boot. So if you know, is this the UFC 315 post show? Yep, that's the one. So if you know about core boot, it's not completely Libre. Let's say it is some proprietary stuff still on your BIOS or your UEFI or whatever it is. Libre boot is fully, but Libre boots do support core boot, I believe. So, but they stopped supporting people using core boot on X201s because of these issues, because you can basically brick your computer. So I thought about core booting the X201, haven't, probably won't. My only regret is I did see on eBay about a year ago a ThinkPad X200 Libre booted, and it was the ThinkPad X200S, which means you get the good screen. Because I think there's an issue with X200s, the screens they die out, and the X200S uses a certain panel which is much better. And it was at a reasonable price. I even got offered a discount on it, and stupidly I didn't buy it. So that's what I'd do. I'd get a Libre booted X200. Have you heard of Mini Free? Yeah, so that's Mini Free is owned by Libre Boot or owned by Leo Rowe, who does it. And yeah, they don't sadly do X200s anymore. They've only got like T440s or something. So, and if you want to have your laptop Libre booted, which she probably would do the X201, because I think Leo Rowe does it herself and maybe somebody else. They probably wouldn't suggest doing it, or they won't do it now because of these issues. Even unless I signed a waiver or something about a warranty. So yeah, I've heard of Mini Free. They're a British company anyway, and that's Leo Rowe's company. Yeah, I know, it's a shame the old X series are becoming so rare, and I was really stupid not getting that ThinkPad Libre booted, ThinkPad 200S, Think X200S. Okay, I've missed a couple out here. So Jay Hareg, oh, don't get me wrong, I did customize my KDE desktop into something more of a Mac OS type thing, but Ryzen thing changing everything ever for the sake of changing is weird to me. Yeah. Well, again, you know, just configure what works for you. So whether that includes Ryzen or not, I mean, it doesn't matter. MVP, it's more like customizing looks versus customizing function. Yeah, that's pretty much Rising, isn't it? But sometimes it includes function. Hollywood, low, not Bollywood. I don't know what that was. Bone, hello Bone. I ended up donating all of my Libre booted ThinkPads. I love the concept of it, but in my day-to-day use, just never really touched them once I graduated university. Oh, okay. So, are you a developer? In the sense of, you know, you get like a work computer, or the work you do, you just don't get to use Linux, or you just saw it as like a learning experience. Sorry. You know, it's funny, again, you know, you look at sort of people like Brody Robertson, what's that guy, MASH, they've all sort of gone away from I don't know, tiling window managers in the normal sense, or let's say tinkering. And again, I'm not really a tinkerer. I would, if you put it in perspective, what I do, I am a Linux console user. And a Linux console is just that. It's just a text console with, on the face of it, limited functionality. But I can access the frame buffer. I can use GNU Screen or Tmux or whatever to have split windows. And I can use I can use the TUIs. So I can use, you know, CMUS, the music player. It uses curses, which works in the term. Anyway, you know all this. What else? You can do a Frankenstein ThinkPad's old chassis and modern CPUs. Haven't tried it, but some people had success. Seems to be a minor engineering feat, though. MVP. Yeah, well, if you follow Trip Code, which you probably do, you've probably heard of. Trip Code, funny enough, he did a Frankenstein laptop, an X201 with an X200, I think, or an X220 or something. So he's done those videos. Have a look at Trip Code. Let's put it in there. Yeah, he's good at that. Of course, he still puts out videos every so often what he's working on. Bone. I was in my FOSS era, but then I bought VR and a 4090, so that went out the window. Well, there you go. I guess that's the thing. If your use case is your use case, you just have to make those sacrifices. I do it even now. I have to do it. For example, well, it's why I did that video on why I'm not using FSF, Free Software Foundation, or certified Linux distros, for example, because I need a modern web browser with JavaScript, even if that includes JavaScript modules that are, let's say, not source of obfuscated, or this of course is, I mean, they you can use FSF, Free Software Foundation Linux OS on a ThinkPad that isn't core booted or Libre booted, but again, I'm using a proprietary BIOS, let's say, with Windows ME. So I'm already compromised. So I think you always have to do what's right for you. You've got to judge, is using a free software distribution a hill worth dying on? Now, if you have so few necessities for computing, or let's say you have so little you're not dependent on so much in computing because of work, family, friends, circumstances, and you can get away with using a free software foundation distribution like Triskel or whatever it's called, or Arch Linux One, whatever it's called, Parabola, great. But otherwise, it's not. I just don't think it's a hill worth dying on. And I sort of did a video on this. I can't remember exactly what I said. I did sort of cover it. I would do it if I needed to. Oh no, sorry. I would do it if I didn't need to do what I do. But of course, with the Free Software Foundation, you've got to remember it's more than just, is it proprietary or not? Is the license that, is basically GPL v3. If it's not, if it's MIT, Apache 2, whatever, I don't know, is it Apache, Mozilla, you're basically not Free Software Foundation certified, and that might be legitimate in their eyes to be pure, but I'm not going to die on that hill. I was using my X60 using that software way of Libre routing with Triskel. It was great as a Word document web browser machine. Yeah, so I mean, the great thing with the X60, I think you didn't need to open up the chassis or the computer physically to Libre boot it. Now, Triskel, I mean, Triskel is basically what Ubuntu, Debian, is it GNOME? But here's the problem with Triskel again. If you're using a web browser, you're probably going to have issues with what websites you go on, because it's going to just say it's going to have Iceweasel or IceCat or something that disables JavaScript or JavaScript injection or whatever it is. I don't actually know. I can't remember. But if it's not their idea of JavaScript being Free Software Foundation certified, it's going to break a lot of websites like YouTube, I guess. Now, obviously, there's ways to get around, which I will not discuss because I don't want to strike on my channel, of using YouTube, let's say. There's certain ways you can use YouTube, which you're probably aware of. But browsing YouTube is still something we're probably going to want to do. And again, you know, is it a hill worth dying on if your family and friends need you to? I don't know. Share a Google Docs photo, share a Google Docs document, or, you know, a Google photo. I don't know. How long have you been using Linux for? Okay, so I think I covered this a long time ago, probably in the live stream. I say a long time ago, really not a long time ago. Technically, I've been using Linux since 2009. But I haven't always been using it, if that makes sense. So I tried out Ubuntu when Ubuntu was, I don't know, 9.4 or something, or 9.10, because I was getting, well, it was sort of in the news, I seem to remember, and I thought, yeah, oh, you can dual boot it. I wonder what it's like. They seem to say it's pretty good. And even then, I was just getting frustrated with Windows. Again, the same sort of thing, not because I wanted to necessarily rise my computer, but XP, again, you're just limited in so much. So I thought, well, what's this like? And I was kind of ambivalent about it for obvious reasons, that back then compatibility with the kind of things I was doing, which would be Windows programs, let's say, you know, you couldn't just start in Windows exe. You had to now get, you know, .deb packages and all this kind of thing. So I was ambivalent about it then. Obviously now, even then, now looking back, I would have still probably switched. But back then, compatibility was still an issue with certain things on the web, I seem to remember, and availability of packages. So without being boring about it, I just kind of dipped in and out. I was using, what's it called? The Tasteful Thickness. Now, I don't know if you're genuinely, you know, here for UFC, and it's kind of funny. Rice is such a strange term. Now, I've heard this about car culture. Yeah, ricing your car. But it's funny if you're here and you have no idea what's going on. Anyway, so yeah, I've used Linux on and off over the years. I've kind of covered this previously, I feel, but what did I use? What did I use? So again, I kept getting fed up with Windows, probably like most people's experience. Whatever reason, I don't install Windows and I put Linux of some sort on it. What's that Ubuntu distribution that is like really lightweight, like LXDE? I used that for years. I can't remember the name of it now. But even then, there was just things that annoyed me until, you know, really until I've installed Arch and fully understood what I'm doing. It's always been a little bit of a disappointment, really. Anyway, sorry, I didn't really answer that very well. Ubuntu, yeah, Ubuntu. It was good, nice and lightweight. But even then, there's just things about it annoyed me. I don't know. Distributions kind of annoy me. Desktop environments kind of annoy me, obviously, or I wouldn't do what I do. But they just kind of annoy me. I don't know. And I'm not trying to compare it to Windows, but let's say you're using KDE. Let's say you're using GNOME. you're still kind of limited. You know, there's no toggle. And why would there be? There's not a toggle that's going to give you infinite customization, rising or not. And it's really until you get into properly into configurations, whether that is actually on GNOME or KDE, but let's assume that it's probably going to be on a tiling window manager. Until you get into that configuration file, it's just another world of limitations. It's just that you don't know that you're no longer limited on Linux. That seems to me just it. I don't know. And I've used I can't remember the name of anything anymore. Manjaro, which hilariously I before I kind of realized absolutely what I was doing. I started to using the terminal and things with Manjaro, but I basically thought I'd be clever and replace all of Pamac, which is Manjaro's package manager, with Pacman, and completely broke the system. So there you go. That's how I ended up on Arch. So not a bad thing. Happy accident, really. Unix Zoomer agreed. Not really viable to convince my grandparents or parents to use Element or Signal. Lol. Worth mentioning. Worth just minimizing information leaked to spooky services. Yeah. Well, this is the other thing. Everything is so much web based now. Web dominates the desktop, dominates everything, really. And if you're using a Linux desktop, I did a video on this, of course. If you're using Linux Mint and you've just switched from Windows, the first thing you're obviously going to do is use the web browser. But the web browser activity you did under Windows is probably going to be the same. You're going to be logging into Google. You're going to be logging into all these proprietary type services, or all of these services that are going to be scraping your data. Okay, Windows don't get the first bite at your computer anymore, and you're technically in a better place. But if all you do is through a web browser, you're really still, if you're worried about control, privacy, and data, you're not going to be much better off in that way. Now, obviously, just that way. Unix Zoomer, racing with a car is more like boy racer aesthetic. Yeah, that's how I understood it. Jay Hereg, I don't like it when my computer I paid for says I do not have permission to do stuff or messes with settings every update. Absolutely. I absolutely agree. Once you learn to the Linux system, pretty much all of them are the same. Yeah. Pretty much all the same. I started with Manjaro from the recommendation of Luke Smith and Mental Outlaw. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I used Manjaro because of Luke Smith, which is interesting because, of course, he changed his mind on Manjaro. For that reason, I think it was because of their package manager, because, of course, they're downstream of Arch Linux. They test Arch Linux packages and then put it into their own package manager, Pamac, and they have their own repositories, which here's the irony with Manjaro is that, they do that for stability, right? Arch Linux is bleeding edge and it breaks, which might be true for a lot of graphical packages, which I don't tend to use because it doesn't break for me. And again, I've done a video on this. But how ironic, because Manjaro, my understanding, although I didn't really have too many issues, I did have an issue with a couple of packages. Manjaro has had a lot of issues over the years with breaking all kinds of things. So they're taking an unstable distribution as they see it and making it stable by breaking their stable distribution. So it's not really a good model. And I think that's why Luke Smith, I don't know about Mental Outlaw, I don't remember him advocating or not, I'm sure he did. disowning it now. And it was interesting. What was interesting, I think Luke Smith just suggested using Artix, because with Artix you've actually got desktop environments on the ISO that you can you've got ISOs with desktop environments pre-installed. So if you want an Artix install of XFCE, you can just install it and just go for a graphical installer. Now, of course, Arch Linux now has Arch install, so you can kind of do the same thing, but in a terminal. So it's a lot easier for people now just to have the Arch Linux experience they want out of the box, which is kind of nice. You know, I'm not against that at all. Unix Zoomer. PewDiePie's switch to Linux is a really great standard. He's fully embraced the Linux way of doing things over trying a Windows-style desktop like KDE, getting frustrated that it isn't the same. Yeah, I mean, to be fair to PewDiePie, who's, I'll be honest, I was always aware of, but because he was at the time the biggest YouTuber in the world back in the day. Because I don't really play games, I didn't follow him, but sounds like he very quickly took what he was doing seriously, in the sense of he knew what he wanted and he realized using Linux was the way to get it, and then he realized Hyperland was the the best way to implement it so far. But again, who knows, he might change, you know, as he continues to learn, he might change it again. There might be a whole series. Who knows? He could become a Linux YouTuber. That might be the direction. It wouldn't be impossible to imagine when you think about it, because it depends what he wants to do. Does he want to try other desktop environments or window managers? Will he, you know, get into like Gentoo? Is perfectly, because he did a very good video. To be fair to him, he did a very good video on it. He covered quite a lot of things, and he made it quite. Here's the problem: when you already know something, it seems obvious. But to people, the stuff he explained, I don't know if it was easily accessible. I don't know, but to me, he explained things pretty well to people. And Jay Hereg, he will make videos on how to run games on Linux. Yeah, and that seems an obvious one because he did games before. Now he's got, you know, a Linux setup that will play most games, right? So yeah, but he could change, you know, he could change out other things and do videos. I don't know, maybe not. Unix Zoom, it's better to accept the Linux way and just learn it instead of trying to get the window. Oh yes, read that. I've used Arch for about a year now, switched to Linux about a year and a half ago. Only distro I've never broken is Arch, ironically. Okay, so you're quite new to it, but it sounds like you've learned a lot if you're using Arch. Yeah, the thing with Arch is, I think, like a lot of distributions, I say a lot of distributions, if something breaks in Linux, it's probably going to come down to the complexity of what you're doing. So if you're having a very minimal setup, you're not probably going to break it. It's probably going to have few dependencies. It's going to be small packages. The complexity of the software is probably not going to cause you problems. Now, let me put it this way. It's probably going to be more like Unix. And I don't want to abuse that term because it's not really true. But the packages are going to be kind of extensible, probably terminal-based. If that's how you're using Linux, you're probably not going to have issues. Now, let's put an example like Mashed, if you know the channel Mashed, okay? Now, he didn't necessarily complain, but he said, I'm not using Arch Linux anymore because it broke on me. You got to understand why it broke on him. He tried to install a 2 gigabyte Android Studio development program, the whole suite for the whole suite for Android development, because he's doing a CS degree, a computer science degree. Now, that is going to have huge dependencies, a huge package, and it broke his system. My only issue with all of that was, why do you think I do my videos on a different computer on this? Now, I haven't had any real problems with this. This is a testing laptop, okay? This is what I'm streaming from. This is what I do my videos on. This is what I test up. Because I want it separate from my main machine. But he didn't have a separate machine, okay? So he compromised his whole desktop for his degree. Now, you could say, well, maybe he hasn't got money for another laptop, but I don't know. It just seems to me I wouldn't, whatever I was doing, I wouldn't compromise my main machine. Or I'd use he would know how to set up a virtual machine. And virtual machines on Linux are pretty good now. You don't need VirtualBox. I use KVM, the kernel package KVM with libvirt and QEMU and libvirt, right? Is that libvirt? Yeah. So he probably has a modern computer. I can run a virtual machine on this with Arch, and it runs reasonable. I don't even do proper pass-through stuff on it, whatever. It just seems to me crazy that you'd compromise your main machine, your home machine, with, your computer science degree, your work. So, yeah, I don't think Arch Linux is a problem, but I'm not going to say that for people who are doing complex stuff aren't going to encounter problems. But I think it's exaggerated. I know it's just internet memes or whatever, but let's catch up some of these comments. Unix Zoomer, he's really into minimalism in his life, so it's possible he is the next coming Luke Smith. Well, now that would be funny. That would be funny. You never know. Unix Zoomer, I took time to learn it in the beginning, just fell in love with how much control I have. Annoyed it didn't find it earlier. Unix Zoomer, yeah, I think that's everybody's story. For the most part, there'd be something that happens in your life. You need to do something. You can't do it on Windows or Mac. And that's what drives you to use Linux. That's how I found it. Jack of Trades. I tried to NixOS about 2 years ago and just cut off doing last month. Oh, my dong last month. Okay. I'm not sure what to say about that. Try to switch. I just switched to NixOS about 2 times years ago and just got. Okay, I don't know what that means. J Hero, breaking stuff is okay if you can just roll it back without hassle. Oh, that's the joke. Okay. Yeah, I know what you mean now, NixOS. Got you. I was so slow there. I was thinking too much about Linux. Anyway, yeah, so breaking stuff in Linux, and I have my own opinion about that. I've done videos on this. Breaking stuff in Linux is a good thing. If you want to learn, you're going to have to make mistakes, because how are you going to compare? Let me put it this way. If everything just works, you've got really no you've got no comparison. So let me put it this way. If you're just typing away on a keyboard, right, and your feedback is just success, it's not a real feedback loop, is it? Here's the thing. If something goes wrong, you will always remember what went wrong. And when something goes wrong, it's when you have to have a deeper understanding of what's happening. If all you put in is some syntax that's online, and all your output is success, first of all, it's not really memorable. It's just that I didn't have to understand anything. I put in this syntax and it works. Now, you could say, well, I paid attention to the syntax, but if your feedback is just, let's say, the pure dopamine of the output, whereas if you have an issue or something breaks, let's say the dopamine is the understanding of not even the output, well, it can be, but the dopamine response and the memorable element is the breaking down the syntax, let's say, or breaking down the issue and fixing the problem. The output is just a happy accident. Now, it might be something you desperately need, but that's why people like fixing things, because it's understanding, it's knowledge. So breaking things on Linux is useful, as well as a kind of a dopamine. That's how I feel about it. It's like anything. It's like a car, right? You have an issue with a car, you work on the car. Now, the YouTube video might say, just follow this, and everything works great. But if something goes wrong, you're not just, like a monkey copying. It's about understanding. That's how I feel about it. I know it's kind of obvious, but that's just how I feel about it. So let's have a look at comments. Unix Zoomer. I use a personalized and tweaked version of Labs, which is like Luke Smith's DWM installation script, installing script. I learned the Unix system off by learning how everything worked, wrote my own bash stuff. Very nice. Yeah, I used Labs as well. Great tool, as well as, really good, effectively distribution of Linux to to use practically and to learn. I mean, he did say once, I think, that businesses use Labs. So yeah. I mean, I don't use Labs obviously anymore, but it was a great learning experience. And of course, you can hit F1 and it gives you like an instruction manual, F2 and it gives you his like videos on different things. So really good. Yeah. Android Studio is really heavy. You wouldn't really want to use it in a VM ever. Well, yeah, but this is the thing. It is so heavy. I think Chris Occhipinti did a video on Android development, and he managed to get down like a development environment for Android down to like 200 megs to do like some of the simpler stuff. But it's just crazy. It's just crazy Android development studio. I don't know. So I'm just glad I'm not a developer, I guess. But when MASH did it, I don't know. I just seemed to me I wouldn't want to mix my CS degree work, because you're going to be pulling in all kinds of different stuff they want. Just have a separate computer. Just have a separate computer, and if you can't do it on a virtual machine on your main computer, just get a separate computer. I mean, unless you're really, really cash strapped, I don't know. It just seems in the modern day, getting a secondhand ThinkPad for £100 or $100, which is a good investment anyway, to have your Arch Linux install, which is going to be nice and lightweight. Okay, I mean, maybe he plays games, so I don't know. Or just Just have another hard drive or something. I don't know. It just seemed crazy to me. Just seemed crazy. Jack of trades. I do KVM, QEMU, and pass through my second graphics card for games on a Windows VM. Cool. It's a joke. No worries. Jack of trades. I've had to start from scratch so many times in my journey. Yeah, same. The tasteful thickness. The goal of Linux to learn to tinker or be alternative to Windows, though. The evangelists. Why can't I speak today or read? Say your grandma should use it. So, good question. Good question. It's both. It's an obvious. Not obvious. What am I trying to say? It's both. The point of Linux is you are not limited, in the sense that you can have a distribution that gives you everything you need without thinking about it. It also means that you can have a distribution that gives you nothing and you've got to put in all the work. So, for example, my mother-in-law uses a Linux distribution, Linux Mint, and it works. Obviously, I use Arch Linux, which would not work for my mother-in-law unless I set it up. But that's the point. Yeah. Absolutely. Again, like I was saying earlier, the point of Windows is to the problem with Windows is when I put it in this perspective, it doesn't make sense. You've got to remember, Windows is not a user perspective, okay? As a user, you don't really get to say what I want to use Windows for. You're told by Microsoft what you use Windows for, okay? So when you buy that computer, you've already been dictated to, because it's going to come with a Windows install, and that's it. You lost the option from the time you purchased it. And by the time you start using it, you're going to be told how it is. My wife, for example, gets bothered all the time by Microsoft Windows 11 telling her to finish her setup. And what that means is she dares not to log into a Microsoft account or set up a OneDrive account or some other Microsoft service. It's constantly pestering. And then it's threatening that, oh, you're not secure and all this because you're not using OneDrive. I mean, it's crazy, but that's what it is. You don't control it. It controls you. I'm using cliche terms. Bill Microsoft and Tim Apple conspiring to tell you what to do. Yeah. And it's interesting because when you say if you're somebody looking on the outside to all this, right? You might be thinking, why does any of this matter? And on the face of it, it probably doesn't. Okay, if you look at a superficial thing, it probably doesn't matter, right? I can use Microsoft Windows and get everything I want to done. And you can even look at it as a time thing, right? It takes me this takes me this much time, but I can get it done. But what do you spend a lot of your time doing, right? So obviously, if you're watching my videos or you're watching Linux videos or you're on this live stream, what are you doing a lot? You're on a computer, okay? So just exclude yourselves for a moment. So say you're a regular person. You probably work with computers in some capacity at work. Probably a lot of people in the West, of course, the West is a tertiary economy, a services economy. You're probably almost exclusively using computers, okay? Now, you've probably got a smartphone. If you're a normal, regular person, you're communicating on a smartphone. And if you're at home, you've probably got a laptop or a desktop, and you're probably doing your stuff at home, documents, whatever. So if you're a regular person, on the face of it, you are heavily invested in spending time with computers. So really, my attitude is, if I'm going to have to spend as much time with a computer as is either dictated to me or I've dictated to myself because I need to use it, then I want to be able to do it as pleasantly as possible, or let's say as bespoke to me as possible, or as comfortably as possible. Let me put it another way. Say you're a driver, say you're a taxi cab driver, okay? Now, you own a taxi cab, right? Let's say you have a Tesla, or let's say you have some. Now, if you're in that Tesla and you're taxiing people around and forth, and you're spending all this time, but you hate the seats, right? And you realize, oh, if I want to upgrade the comfort of the seats because it has like heated seats, I've got to pay a subscription to Tesla. Or if I want to have a speed increase on Tesla for acceleration, I've got to pay a subscription. Or if I want to have, I don't know, air conditioning, I've got to pay a subscription. Or let's say you have a car that you use as a taxi that is, so many years old, I haven't got automatic steering or whatever. Now, whatever your car you're using, for you is horrible, but you have to use that car day in, day out. What do? You either upgrade it or you replace the car. So it's no different to me that whatever I'm spending a lot of time with, I want to have it bespoke to me, that makes me comfortable, that I'm happy with, that I can do what I need to. So on the face of it, if you're looking in and you don't care about these things because it's just how you've always done things, you're going to assume it doesn't matter. But the reality is, this does matter to people, because you are inevitably in the West going to be spending a long time with computers, and really, computers should be a bespoke system to its user. If the output has to be what the company needs, or the output has to be what you need, then if you need a certain system, I understand that. But most modern computers, the outputs you get can be achieved on Linux, on Mac, on Windows. How you achieve that output is really up to you. And for it to be up to you, you're probably going to have to use Linux. Otherwise, it's not really up to you. It's up to Apple and it's up to Microsoft. And while you're toiling away in some horrible document editor or VS Code or some terrible application, you either don't know or you're too afraid to change what you're doing, and you'll just have to suffer. And you'll have to suffer that day in and day out. And like I said before, there are certain things I want to do in principle, but I'm not willing to die on a hill for. But at the same time, I will do things if I can do them, and I won't suffer the things I don't need to do. So it comes down to each individual. Is it bespoke to you? That's how I kind of feel about it. I don't know if that's a good explanation, but sure. But in this scenario, your Linux car option will be from a brand with less compatibility for all sorts of things like Go, XLR, etc. There are wild trade-offs inherent in this exchange. That's why we have things like the Linux Challenge, where people try to engage with basic tasks if they can on Linux. Okay, so I don't Go XLR. I don't know what that is. Okay. Well, here's the thing. I don't advocate telling people what to do. I don't Go XLR. Revenue broadcaster plan. Okay, some mixer thing. So, okay. So I'm not advocating you suffering with Linux. What I'm saying is that you're probably not going to get the options through Microsoft or Apple. Now, if Microsoft or Apple works for you, as it does for millions of people, then obviously stick with that. And like you say, there's the Linux challenge to see if people can engage and see if it works for them. Yeah, that's it. I'm advocating what's right for you. But what I'm saying is you don't have that option of what's right for you when it comes down to Microsoft or Mac OS, because Mac OS and Microsoft dictate your user environment and how you do things. So, for example, I've used Mac OS where I've had an insane situation where I've had a printer that I tried to install the driver, and Mac OS said to me, "You're not allowed to install that driver." Why are you not allowed to install a driver? Because hasn't been updated. This is a printer driver that hasn't been updated for so long. You have to go back to the manufacturer and get an updated updated driver. Okay, so I went to the manufacturer. That's the latest driver. So I tried it again and again. I am not allowed to install that driver on Mac OS, and therefore I cannot use that printer. So that piece of hardware that works perfectly fine on Linux and even Microsoft does not work on Mac. Absolutely crazy. Now, I'm not objecting to Mac OS highlighting the driver being so many years old, but it's not my option. It's dictated to me. I don't get to choose that. That's my issue with it. Now, you might have a audio mixer that doesn't have a Linux driver, or the Linux driver is bad. And I'm not advocating that, you personally have to write the driver. But the point is, it's been dictated to you. That's my issue with those things. Now, if you're in a scenario or a situation where it's not an issue for you, then carry on using Mac or Windows. But the point is, Windows and Mac are telling you what you can and can't do. Unix Zoomer, yeah, basically, tasteful fitness. I just feel like Linux Mint should be spending all their time looking to be compatible with as many programs that Windows Mac uses. Considering away than that. If you want people to buy your Linux car, it needs to run Android Auto, so to speak. So I'll be honest, I don't know what Linux Mints are trying or not trying to do. The only thing I'd say is I think the way things have gone, Linux Mint is really irrelevant to other distributions, because let me put it this way. Most people are interacting through the web browser. If you're using, say, a Microsoft product, you can probably use it for a web browser now. Now, you might have reduced functionality, and a lot of this is in response to Google. So you've got, Microsoft 365 in the web browser now with kind of less functionality, but you can use it. Like you can use Google Docs and whatever. So if you're talking about programs, then what I would say is that if you look at the Linux kernel development, which obviously Linux Mint will use, most of the drivers are either in a kernel, or there'll be drivers written separate, and things like Linux Mint will say, do you want to install them? Now, I don't know if Linux Mint isn't prioritizing that and they're worrying about Wayland over X11. I'll be honest, I don't know. You raise a point. I'll be honest, I don't necessarily disagree with it, but again, it's one of those things where, like I said in the past, I sort of did flicker between Windows and Ubuntu because of these kinds of issues. Now, I'm not saying that it's as bad as that now, and I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying there's huge numbers of legacy Windows programs that are supported. But here's another thing. If I remember rightly, if you look at like computer games in Linux now, of course they use Proton, which is developed by Valve, which is like a compatibility layer for Wine to run any computer game. But also I think it runs, you've got things like Bottles as well, which will basically run any Windows program. So again, it's not like there aren't people out there, or it's not like there aren't developers out there who are trying to have backwards compatibility. Yes, it's not going to be perfect. I mean, funny enough, you look at Microsoft, of course, there's a corollary or an opposite effort where, they try to make themselves compatible with Linux, with WSL, but you're not going to get full compatibility with Linux, right? There's still going to be issues. Now, I'm not saying as well, that that's perfect, and I'm not saying there's, as many people, need Linux things. But it's a good point. Again, I don't know if it's a hill worth dying on. I mean, if it's right for you staying on Windows, I mean, that's fine. I just don't think. What I'm trying to say is that in principle, you don't have any options. They're all decided for you. What is your if you run Android Auto? Now, again, I think Linux does have compatibility, or there's some kind of compatibility with Android applications. I can't remember what it's called. I don't really use it, but then I don't know what Windows compatibility with Android stuff is. I guess Android Auto works, or whatever it is. Is that like the Google Auto thing for like driving? I don't know. What's your favorite Lynch movie? Mulholland Drive. What's your favorite? Preposterous Potato. It's not up to Linux Mint to make programs compatible. It's up to the developers. Yeah, absolutely true. And obviously, more people or more developers are still going to have Windows first because of its popularity. But if you're using Linux and you've got Proton and Bottles and all this stuff, you can play games and run Windows through Wine and all this. So I don't know. I don't know. Tasteful Fitness. I'm not really laying blame on any particular org or person. I'm just saying, if adoption were my goal, I'd laser focus on the sphere. Yeah, fair point. Well, again, I'll be honest, I don't know. If you gave me an example like the audio mixer, if it literally doesn't work with Linux, I mean, you've made your point. You need to use that audio mixer, and you can't use it on Linux, so you're going to stick with Windows or Mac. Perfectly fine. I understand that. Now, maybe that somebody will make a driver for it in the future, or some program that works with it in the future. But I mean, my only thing is, my initial guess was, well, Proton and Bottles and all these things, which are compatibility layers or whatever they are between Windows and Linux, would probably run it. But then maybe there's issues with it. I don't know. And in relation to, I'm just saying, for adoption, my goal, I'd laser focus on that sphere. Yeah, if that's your goal, I know what you're saying. Linux Mint is a sort of everyman OS. I'll be honest, I don't know how good or bad they're doing, but it seems like you're not so impressed. So maybe that's right. Maybe they've dropped the ball there. I don't know. I guess, I mean, this is always the thing. We've always known that the Linux desktop has lagged behind in popularity to the Windows desktop for whatever reason, whether it is lack of development, the obvious one that it doesn't come pre-installed with most computers, and people aren't willing to uninstall Windows. Maybe that's starting to change slowly, but I don't know. It's a good point. It's a good point. I just don't know. I just don't know how I feel about it, because I just see general progress in that way because of Proton and again bottles. I can't remember because I don't use this stuff and I'm obviously in my own bubble. I don't know, but I do know somebody who does use Linux Mint, and for them, most of their stuff's the web browser. Unix ZoomX. Video games are in real life bloat. Better to find in real life hobby, in my opinion. Yeah, I'm not an advocate of computer games. You probably heard. I just it's just a sponge of time. So you can use Google Maps and Spotify and stuff in your car's information system. Okay, infotainment system. Yeah, I wondered if it was that. I mean, would you want that on your? I guess if you had a Linux phone, you'd have that. But would you want that on your Linux desktop? I mean, I don't doubt it's missing, but I don't know. I think a large element is normies are afraid to try it because of the Hollywood image of it being for hackers. Yeah, I don't doubt. I think you're right. I think you're right. Mine would be Eraserhead, even though it's the most disturbing film I've ever watched. Yeah, Eraserhead's great. Unix. I agree with Luke Smith's take on them for the most part. They eat into your brain in a way that no other kind of media really does. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was talking about like feedback loops. Of course, you're playing a computer game, that direct interaction is input, right? You're not a passive observer. You're an active participant in whatever construct the game is, okay? And the output from your input, let's say on the controller, there's your like dopamine response. We know about gamification of Facebook and social media. It is an obvious thing. The output is dopamine, but what is it for? It's for nothing, right? It's just a vacuum of time and lack of progress. Because the game, let's be honest about it, if you're an esports gamer, the output is money, right? It's not the game. Now you might enjoy what you're doing, but I don't know what I'm talking about. I sound ridiculous when I talk about stuff, but I think we all know what we're talking about here. A game, whether you like games or not, are a sponge of time. And that is true of anything. However, say you're playing a sport. If you're outside playing a sport, at least it's a physical human dopamine response. At least you're doing some real life social interaction. Because playing a game online, even with people you technically know in real life, I don't know. I don't want to exaggerate this because people casually playing games. They're casually playing games. That's fine. But we all know the cliche. Obsessive computer games people. Are they really going to have anything to show for it? And I guess the Luke Smith brain rot thing. I don't know. I've got my own issue. I've got my own issues with computer games, irrespective of all of this kind of thing about in relation to other media. So I'll probably need to do a video on that anyway. David Collins Cubit, hello. I've noticed you over the years. It sounds like I've been doing this forever. Over the months, making comments on my videos. What network hardware do you use? Network hardware. So I'm guessing you mean like routers and maybe Wi-Fi chips. Is that my understanding? So I just use a PlusNet router. I use PlusNet and I have a router. I don't know what the router is. I don't really care. I don't use any open source router software. I don't even know if I can put an open source router software on it, because there's that one, I can't remember, OpenWrt or something. MikRotik. What's MikRotik? MikRotik. It's a root. So no, I don't use MikRotik. But I'm guessing, is that is it open source or something? Can you? It's the Latvian network equipment. OpenWRT, yeah. So I don't have anything like that. It's just a router. Now I've seen, what's it called? Mental Outlaws videos on OpenWRT on different routers, all very interesting, but no, I haven't done anything with that. I don't know the consequences with my network provider, with my ISP. It's not something that really interests me. And I'm thinking, is it a security thing? Should I be relying on PlusNet routers? Can I change them? Can I flash them with a OpenWRT OS or whatever? I don't know. So to be honest, I've got nothing really exciting to say on that. I'm afraid. Unix Zimmer, no other media has me thinking about them at school or other than video games. A bookworm doesn't think about books all day when doing other stuff, if you get what I mean. Yeah, again, computer games, I don't think computer games. Also, I don't want to sound like an absolutist on like anybody ever playing them, if that makes sense. But having been a teenager, I will be honest, when I was a teenager, I very quickly felt this is a huge sink of time with no benefit. Nothing to show for it. Real God, I used to have Luke Smith boomer taping games. I agree with you, James, that these esport games don't serve any purpose. Yeah, I generally agree with what he says about them. I also have my own opinions about them in relation to other things, which I think you'll probably find boring if I talk about, and I need to organize my thoughts on it. But yeah. Unix, I think what is so bad about them is many of them satisfy your emotional human needs, and so your brain fails to seek them out in real life, and you become a bit of a loser. I think that's yeah, I can see it being a huge distraction. David Coinscue, Rotic is just a very powerful and cheap hardware. Okay, cool. Preposterous potato, you're not allowed to on PlusNet routers. Yeah, that was my guess. I'll tell you why I didn't even probably think about trying with this. So with the router, I think I tried to, on a PlusNet router, I think I tried to put on like a custom DNS or something. I was looking at once, And it was like, you can't have a custom DNS. You're having our DNS. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess I'm not having. And that was the thing, you know, the options on the router are so limiting. And I thought, I'm not even going to waste any more time on this. So yeah, I was looking at like customization on it. I was thinking, okay, what can I do with this? Anything interesting? And it's very early on. It was like, no, you forget about any of this. You're not going to have any options. We're dictating how you have your router. So I was like, okay. But I learned that there are great games out there, games with great story and writing that don't really feed into that nicotine loop. Okay, so Real God, I don't doubt that technically, but like I was hinting at, I've got my own opinions on games that are sort of outside of like, are they good or bad for you in brain rot or waste of time about story and these kinds of things. But I need to organize my thoughts on that. So I have an issue with whether games are good at being storytelling media. That's all I'm going to say, because I'd need to go into it quite a lot, and it's not going to be very interesting anyway. But yeah, I don't disagree with that necessarily. You know, I'm not saying that there's not any good stories in computer games, but I do have my own issues with whether games are good storytelling mediums. Anyway, Prosperous Potato, I asked before. Yeah, pretty much the same. Plus net routers, just no go. Tasteful Thickness, Tectium is FOSS and available on its full-blown DNS software. Lets you choose your DNS block list and whole shebang. Okay, cool. Thanks for that. I'll have a look at that. Technicium. Okay, I'm probably going to end this stream in the next 10 minutes. So if you've got any more questions, just get them out there and I'll try and answer them. And it all kind of worked out all right, actually, in the end. I thought I'd do an impromptu stream like Chris Occupinti. And look, I've got 11 users and 7 likes. How great is that? And thanks for all coming on. Anyway, so yeah, in the next sort of 10 minutes, I'll be going. So if you've got any questions, you want to ask anything. Yeah. Is it 9 likes? Oh, 9 likes now. Thank you. Unix Zoomer. Yeah, I understand. I'm not judging anyone else doing it. It's just my personal life. Yeah. I think a lot of people project their insecurities into video games. Oh, yeah, I don't doubt that. Yeah. Computer games, you can see they do consume people. Many games are great story and visual wise. I just find them bad because they kind of replace real interaction in a way no other media does. Yeah. And I think, again, that's like the feedback loop. You feel like you're making some real impact because it's an interactive environment. You're not a passive consumer, right? You have to make the game let's put it this way. The game requires your input, right? So you feel in itself, you feel like you're doing something significant. Unix, but again, that's just my opinion about my own life. What's your favorite David Bowie album? Okay. I'll be honest, I don't dislike David Bowie. That's not a great way to start. I like David Bowie, but I'm not really an album person. I just kind of like music tracks here and there. I kind of like, is it Ground Control to Major Tom? Whatever one that is. I can't remember. Let's Dance is another one. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of individual pieces of music of his I like over the years. I did like the one he had in Lost Highway, I'm Deranged. That was quite good. So yeah, there's a few here and there I quite like songs. Space Oddity, yeah, I like that. Seems to be hitting double digits on the subscribers list. Yeah, I know. Crazy. I'll be honest, I do feel kind of bad that I haven't been putting out many videos of the last couple of months. So from November, I had some time to put out a video a day. and I thought, I'm going to do this, so I'm going to put out a video a day. And it was absolutely fine, but just my commitments, have gone shot up again, and it's very difficult for me to even do this stream. But to put out a video a day is difficult, and I was trying to do even doing one a week at the moment. It's just, I don't know. I need to get organized. It can be done, and I will. So I've still got plenty of videos I want to make. So I do I know I shouldn't apologize, but I do actually apologize because, I went from that to, down in video content. So I'm going to try and get some more videos out. Who knows how many subscribers I'll get. That song was actually sung on the ISS by astronaut Tim Peake, was it? Cool. Do you have a genre or era of music you like the most? So I wouldn't say an era necessarily. My sort of favorite genre would be sort of electronic music. These days, I'll be honest, most of the music I listen to is completely random. So if I hear something I like, I'll tend to listen to it. I'll find what piece of music it was and I'll listen to it. However, I probably find I don't like the rest of the music that the musician's done. And that's kind of an arbitrary thing. That's my experience. I tend to like bits of music here and there, but let me just put it if it's electronica, I'm likelier to like that piece of music. It's more likely I'm going to enjoy that piece of music. I think that's the best way to put it. But I like completely random musicians. So let me just throw some stuff out there. I mean, you can look at there's a musician I like called Pie Corner Audio, P-Y. But lately, not so much. I did like a weird sort of musician called Trust. Some of his earlier albums I like, but it's sort of a weird, I don't know, he's sort of, what else? Lawn. I used to like Lawn, which did like this weird sort of moody stuff. They've all sort of been used on like soundtracks here and there. But yeah, Lawn is great, and that's the thing. But then there's like some stuff I don't know. Recently, not so much. I don't know if Lawn's done any stuff lately. So there, I don't know. There's a few that I could generally say I like a lot of the music. And I can sort of say others, but I don't know. I have to have a think. Okay. What else? What computers do you have? Okay, so I'll just show you. All right, so I have this ThinkPad X201. Now this is the ThinkPad with this trackpad, which I do not like, but it has a trackpad which I've disabled. I have this ThinkPad X201 without a trackpad, which I prefer. And what else? So phones, I've got this Pixel 5 with Graphene OS. Those are my main three devices, let's say. I also have, which I've shown on videos before, I have an old tablet which I use for storyboarding. I'm done storyboarding very late. I have a ebook reader which I've shown on a video before. Yeah, so what was the tablet? The tablet is an Asus 7 Memo pad or something. I mean, it's just the funny thing that I did the video on the Asus 7 Memo pad because I found that was it Postmarket OS had like support for it, or I was like, what? Why would they support that? But so I was just like, wow, okay, how bizarre is that? I mean, it's a really low powered device, even, you know, it's just really low powered, you know. Here's the thing with any Android device, it shouldn't be a problem being a low powered device, right? As far as I'm concerned, it shouldn't be a problem. It should be like this. This is, in theory, this is a low powered device now, even though when it first came out, it would have been a higher powered device, even though it was an X series, right? But an Asus MemoPad was kind of a low powered device at the time. But even then, I don't think it's a hardware problem. It's because Android versions are, how to put it, they're bloated. There's no way of putting it. They're bloated. You have a piece of hardware, and the vendor of the hardware, or let's say the manufacturer of the hardware, put their own stuff on it, and it's all junk. I mean, Asus stuff on it's just bloated junk, never got updated, whatever. And then you've got, you know, Google services stuff. You're going to install applications through the App Store. It's going to have Android, whatever version on it, that's not going to run fast, even if you remove the stuff off it. But here's the problem. With a touch device, tablet, phone, I want a graphical user interface. I do not want to use Unix on that device. And when I sort of covered this, and I will be doing a video on this, I do not want to be using Unix on that kind of device because it's text streams, and I do not have a full-size keyboard. I do not want to use the full-size keyboard. I want to be able to hit buttons. Now, I could do the Chris Occhipenti thing and script everything and whatever, and that's fine. But really, the problem is that these devices are designed to be disposable. Any electronic device is effectively, by its manufacturer, designed to be disposable. In so many years, you replace it. That's how their business model works. And it's got progressively worse. The time windows are getting shorter and shorter. It's only because of things like the European Union that have mandated that device support has to be so many years. I think it got so bad with Google that it would be only like 3 years and they'd stop supporting a device or something, or Samsung would stop supporting a device after 3 years. And of course, we know from Apple, at the end of that support, they deliberately make the device so horrible to use, so slow, battery life so bad that you're begging to upgrade. You're begging to replace a relatively new device that would have been top end a few years before, is now considered end of life and horrible to use. So there's really not many good options because of life. If you're using a phone, you're likely going to be using that phone for communication between family and friends. And family and friends are not going to be using F-Droid stuff. They're going to be using Google services or whatever, right? Google service stuff, so Google Play Store stuff. You're not going to have a good time if you're an advocate of F-Droid in that regard. Now, you could kind of get away around that if you go on your web browser on your phone and interact with your family through Google services through, you know, web browser type situation on your phone. But again, it's going to run pretty badly and it's only going to get worse. Basically, there's not many good options with a phone. That's my feeling. So it's one of those things, again, I'm not going to die on that hill and say I want a Linux phone because I don't want a Linux phone. Yeah. So I don't know why I went off that rant, but yeah, basically, it's a terrible situation for Android, iOS. It's terrible. And you're kind of captive to your environment. I'm going to do a video on this, so hopefully I can organize my thoughts better on it. I think that covers all the devices, and I've rambled on that one. So let's see, where are we? I'm considering the newer Pixels for longer support, but maybe a cheaper old refurb would be a better idea. Any thoughts? Right. So again, this is okay. So let's just go into this. So this will be my last sort of answer, I guess, before the stream ends. So I've got Pixel 5 running Graphene OS. Now the Pixel 5 no longer gets updates. Google didn't know. Oh, did I miss your question? Oh, sorry, real God. Do you like Jungle DNB? I'll be honest, I don't really listen to Jungle DNB/DNB. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll listen to some, and then send me a question, and I'll tell you what I make of some of these Jungle DNB songs. Or look for my email. You can get my email off my YouTube, and I'll tell you what I make of them. But no, I don't tend to listen to Jungle DNB. Sorry, but I will listen to some. Send me an email. I'll get back to you if I like it or not, because I might really like it. Anyway, so I've got this Pixel 5. No longer gets Google updates or Google Android updates, okay? Security or whatever, or the Pixel itself. So Graphene OS is like downstream, of course, of Google, Android, and they apply their own additions to the Google Android updates. So what that means is I just no longer get updates because there's no more updates for Graphene OS to apply. And interesting, every time I restart my phone, Graphene OS says, be aware your phone no longer gets updates. You should upgrade your phone. Get a phone that's Graphene OS compatible and whatever. Now, I've got a bit of a dilemma with this. To be fair to Graphene OS, it runs really great. It runs fast compared to, well, I don't know about stock Android, but the usual Android you get from a vendor, whether it's Samsung or even Google, with all their Google services stuff you can't uninstall. And the thing with Graphene OS, you can have a sandboxed Google Play Store with all the Google apps, okay, which can still interact with your phone. Because, again, it's not a hill I'm going to die on. I'm not going to be forcing all my family members to use F-Droid because they're not going to do it. They use Google stuff. I'm going to have to use Google stuff. And I use Graphene OS to use my Google stuff. So, fine. So, your question is, maybe a cheaper old refurb would be a better idea. At what point are you going to worry about the security updates? I've gone past the security updates now by 6 months. I have no intention of upgrading this phone, which in principle is not a good idea. This 15-year-old ThinkPad is still going to get updates. The Linux kernel is still going to update, and the Linux kernel is still going to run on this. Arch Linux packages are going to run on this and update. Play Store packages are still going to run on this unless the Android version no longer supports that particular Play Store package, which could happen in so many years. But if you like, the kernel is no longer getting updates. Now, should I be worried about that? I don't even know the answer myself. And this is probably what's going to take part of my video. Now, I have no intention of grading it though. So I'm running the risk in the long term of some, I don't know, 0-day exploit, I guess is the biggest worry, where that version of Android is compromised, even with Graphene OS's version of that Android, let's say, with all their security features. Unless they're going to suddenly push out an emergency update or patch, I guess I would be vulnerable. I don't know. So you've got to weigh it yourself, I think. I don't think I'd use my laptop if I knew I wasn't getting updates, because there's so much critical stuff. My phone, I technically got work stuff on there, but you know what? I don't know. I don't really care. I want the phone to be as easy to use as possible. I want the security to be there, but it's not enough for me to worry about. I don't know. I probably haven't answered that great. And again, because I've sort of got in my mind a video I'm going to do on it. But if you get a cheaper, older refurb, be aware you're not going to have security updates for very long. If you buy a brand new Pixel now, you get 8 years from Android. If you install Graphene OS on it, you get the equivalent 8 years, because Graphene OS will install their equivalent downstream Android into your phone. But once Google no longer support that, that's it. Hey Ahmed Nasser, great to see you. Sorry, you've just entered into the, I don't know how long you've been in the room, but you've just entered in as I'm about to finish, so I kind of apologize. I just did an impromptu when I tried to copy Chris Occhipinti. And it's funny because I haven't seen many of my regulars in, or regular people. But I guess you can replay the whole stream if you want when it finishes. Well, I can't even believe this has gone 2 hours and a half. It's gone pretty quick, actually. Anyway, I feel bad because I haven't really answered your question, because I don't know. Should you get a cheaper old refurb? Should you get a cheaper? I don't know. You gotta judge it yourself. I didn't spend much on this. It was like £100 a few years ago, a couple of years ago. I don't know. I guess I'm not a big fan of phone. Or I'll say I'm not a big fan of phones. I'm not. I'm always disappointed with phones. I'm always disappointed with phones, so I kind of don't care enough. I probably should, but anyway, I'll try and answer that in the video. Look out for the video when it comes out, hopefully in the next couple of days at most. Have you ever used or owned one of the Lenovo ThinkStation or ThinkCenter desktop computers? So I have had a work Lenovo ThinkStation or Center, I can't remember, a few years ago. What I know you haven't literally said what are my opinions of it, but my opinions of it were no opinion. It was running Windows, just another Windows environment, just happened to be a ThinkStation, ThinkCenter thing. I think it was okay, but it worked. Yeah, sorry, I don't really know what to say about that. Unix Zoom, it sucks how much a smartphone has become a necessity nowadays. Yes, that is a good point. It does. I am getting more and more frustrated, and I think this has been covered on other Linux channels some years ago, even Luke Smith, at how much more limiting using your desktop is for services. Let's say if you don't have an app, sometimes you are limited. If you do not have the phone app, you can find that the service you want isn't available in the web browser. I've had something recently that happened, and I can't remember. Most people use phones for entertainment nowadays. I barely use mine at all. Only for talking to my older family members. Okay, yeah. Yeah. So this is the thing, you can't avoid it. It will always be there. And it is going to increase by definition. more and more is going to be pushed over to the phone. I think we all know that. There'll always be things you can't realistically do or be expected to do on a phone, of course, but more and more our lives are going to become phone dependent, and it's kind of heavy already, whether it's work or family. The new Pixels are stupid expensive, though. That's why I'm against the idea. I agree. To be honest, I'm being very presumptuous now, but it's a bit like this 15-year-old ThinkPad. Now, I know my setup is not going to be for everyone, normies or whatever users, but this thing I can make run on almost everything as good or better than any Windows 11 install, or even, I know, some heavy KDE install. I don't know. Maybe I'm being presumptuous. But, this is a 15-year-old computer, and, it runs like lightning pretty much. And my other one runs even faster. Okay. With exceptions, there are always going to be exceptions. Obviously, I can't play games, any modern games by definition anyway, and whatever. But I mean, from what most people want, this is like lightning. Okay. And with this, using graphene, it's pretty fast at doing most things. But this is end of life for Android. This works with the latest updates for Arch. So one's a problem and is only 5 years old, and one is 15 years old and no problem. So the new Pixels, are going to be like, what, $1,000+ or pounds or whatever region you're in, euros. I'll be honest, I don't know. Personally, I wouldn't spend more than £100 on a phone, and I wouldn't get a contract, because the other way is getting a contract. But I'm not going to be tied into a contract for a phone. I used to do it years ago, but again, it's just crazy now. You should definitely live stream more. Thank you. I'll be honest, I don't know if my live streams are good for most people, Linux or not. So I probably ramble too much, but it's a live stream. I guess you can ramble. How is switching to BSD? Oh, yeah, because I made that video, didn't I, about Unix. Well, I still haven't switched to BSD. I still need to do a video on BSD, and I will do a video on BSD. I just can't promise when that will happen. So I guess how switching's not happening, not switching at the moment. I could easily get by with a flip phone if it wasn't for one or two things that I need a phone for. Yeah. Here's my other thing with phones. I'll be honest, if I'm out and about and I want to, some information, news, or I don't know, if it is a service, if I want to pay something, it's useful. I'll be honest, it's useful. And I'm not going to carry this laptop around with me and suddenly like start walking around the street with it, trying to pay a service and try and connect to some Wi-Fi. I'm going to use my phone. It's useful. I can't be disingenuous with a phone and say it's not useful. It is useful, but it's riddled with problems. Phones unfortunately have come out at a time where they are limited by the organizations that effectively control them, and there's free, isn't there? In the West, there's free. Apple, Google, Samsung, and they're not going to be doing it for your benefit. They're not going to be there to give you options. They're there to give you a device that will last effectively for so long, and then you have to upgrade it, or you're going to suffer even more. And you've got no option. Now, yes, with a Google Pixel, you can unlock the bootloader and install whatever operating system you want. Well, not necessarily it depends if it's supported, but graphene support Pixel, so you can install graphene. but it's a huge mess. You look at any open source phone ROM or whatever you want to call it, and you're going to find it supports so many devices and not other devices. Any single different ROM is going to support some and none devices. That's how it is. It's a mess. It's horrible. And you're not going to get all the functionality you want. Some of them have got different support, or how to explain it. So, you know, like, here's the thing. Now, what's amusing about this Graphene OS is this is not a rooted device, right? Graphene does not root your device. So I still am limited. If I was using a lineage, I could have a rooted device. Now, Graphene do this for a very good reason. They want you to be able to use your banking apps, right? And yes, there's technically ways to get around spoofing banking apps with rooted devices, because banking apps will not operate with rooted devices if they detect you're using a rooted device, because they say it's a security thing. Now, we can go into the whole security thing, or if it's not a security issue, but that's how it is. So Graphene OS don't root the device. I've not got full control of this device. That's something you've got to understand with phones, is it is a huge mess. Now, you know, this, I don't have full control really, because I don't have whatever it's called, LibreBoot or whatever. But here's the thing. I don't think missing out on LibreBoot or Core Boot is a disproportionate change to being able to use a banking service. I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, that's how significant, you know, the disruption can be if you have a rooted device on your phone, a rooted OS. You know, it's just crazy. Okay, we're going to wrap this up now. A good medium could be those cheap Moto phones, because they have support but won't cost near $1,000. Yeah, Chris Occhipinti, I think, uses something like that. No phone's the way to go if you can. It certainly is if you can. I can't live without WhatsApp. Yeah, same. I tried to switch people with more open source privacy scripts and chat apps, but it's just like fighting with windmills. Family, yeah, absolutely agree. Absolutely the same. So there we go. All right, cheers, guys. So I think we will leave it there at 2.5 hours. I'll be honest, I was only aiming for about an hour. So that's gone way longer than expected. So I'll try and get a video out for tomorrow. It'll go up to Patreons first, probably tonight. Hopefully I'll be able to do it. I don't know. A bit worried about it now, but I'm sure I'll be fine. And I want to say I'm going to try and do more videos more regularly, maybe live streams. I'm just going to have to be more disciplined and more organized. But we'll see. Thanks for a great stream. Thanks for joining the stream. Seen some new people here I haven't necessarily seen before. It was impromptu, so I've only had a handful of people. I went the Chris Occhipinti route because I thought, why not? So there we go. Thanks all of you for coming on. Yeah, I will see you later. See you, Ahmed, and later.